The chamber was built from stone that never knew a sun. It sat under the frozen bedrock of a moon with no name, and every surface was smooth and gray and quiet. And the air smelled like old iron and old fear, and the doors were locked with codes. That did not exist on any public registry, and that was how the Galactic Council liked it. When the rumors were heavy, and the stars felt close, and the truth walked like a shadow behind every voice, they came in without escorts and without banners, and without the proud music they used in public halls. They sat far from each other and kept their hands still. They spoke in low tones because low tones made lies harder and made nerves plain. And the old story drifted through the room like cold fog, the story of a species that had burned bright, the story that scholars called a fable and soldiers called a warning and traders called bad luck, the story of humans. In the archives, the humans were not a line or a chart. They were a stain, a place where records bent and broke, where ships went missing and wars ended too fast, where allies became quiet and enemies became dust, and then the stain dried and the entries stopped. And the scribes wrote a neat last sentence to comfort themselves. They wrote that the humans were gone, and time made that sentence feel safe. Now the neat sentence felt wrong, because out where the trade lanes crossed like silver threads and the colonies sat like bright beads on those threads, there were beads missing. There were gaps that had no pirates and no storms and no taxes and no answers. There were fleets. That sent a last joke or a last song or a last be back soon, and then nothing. A silence that was heavy enough to bend a mind if you pressed your ear to it. And the few survivors who did limp home with cracked holes and cracked voices said they had seen something they should not say out loud. They said the ships were dark in the light. On their hulls was like winter lightning, and their weapons did not flare, they simply erased things, and no one begged and no one had time to pray. And on the side of one ship there had been marks, not clean and new, not proud, but old and rough and still proud because of that. Marks and letters that none of them could read, and yet could feel. Marks that made the tongue try to shape a sound that was not in any of their languages. And a Heller navigator with half a face left had whispered to a medic in the dock, Terran. And then the medic had turned away and said nothing, and the navigator had died. So the council met in secret, because secrets were softer than panic and cheaper than war, and because the public would ask for promises, and they had none to give. And the ceiling lights were dim, and the center table showed a slow drift of stars. And the speaker of Origin, who loved order and bright laws, tapped one thin claw on stone and said that the agenda was simple, that they would review evidence and then agree to call the rumors closed, and he smiled the way a tired father smiles at thunder, as if politeness could unmake it. Across from him sat High Archivist Rael of the Lyad, whose skin grew pale when old Dada woke up, and he carried 3 slates bound with a cloth that had been woven before any of the newest members of the council were born. And he did not smile. He did not look at anyone for long. He watched the table where the stars moved. And the lights made his eyes look like 2 small moons as he said that no one here should use the word fable tonight. Not even as a joke. General Veyer of the Heller Empire leaned back and let his armor show in the open, polished black with a thin blue line like a scar, and he said that this was a trader's tale grown fat on fear, that the roots had been hit by organized raiders with new toys, that the raiders used old marks because old marks hurt worse, and his voice was hard enough to cut glass. He said that the Empire would send a punitive fleet, and that would be that. Merchant Marshal. Sen of the Free Guilds rubbed her fingers together as if counting coins that were not there, and said that 5 convoy insurers had collapsed in the last 10 cycles, that 6 houses had closed their docks and moved in the night to smaller moons, that a rumor that eats the future is not a rumor. It is a debt. And the debt was now too big to hide. A small diplomat from a minor water world, a being whose people sang to ice to make it friendly and had never fired a gun, asked in a small voice why the old records about humans were shaped like a burned door, why so many pages had ash on them and so many names had no time of death, and no one answered for a long moment. And then the archivist said there was a reason, but he would not give it a name yet. Because names invited things to dinner, they moved. Through testimony like a ship moves through dust, slow and careful. They watched the rescue station footage where 3 survivors tried to draw the same long shape with shaking hands. A prow like a wedge, a long spine, a belly of dark angles, and the lights on the hull like ice fire veins, and one survivor slapped the table and cried because the blue was the same blue he had seen as a child in a museum under a glass dome labeled Pre-Expansion Earth. He had wanted to touch it, and now he wanted to cut his own eyes. They heard a miner's black box audio. Only 13 seconds, a voice that said Warships, new signature, no old. Oh, stars old. And then the sound you get when a mountain falls into the sea in a dream. And the box went quiet, and the station tech who had been the miners. Sister put her hand over her mouth, and the audio kept playing the soft hum of a dead room, till someone turned it off. The general laughed once, too loud and too fast, and said that silence was cheap to fake, that fear was cheaper. That this was a political play by the guilds to weaken the empire's tax arm and make new trade corridors under cover of ghost stories. And the merchant marshal said that if she wanted to weaken the empire, she had sharper tools. And the speaker of Orizon asked them please to respect the room. And the archivist lifted one old slate and said he had something that was not a rumor. It was a slow capture, made by a long-range probe that had no right to still be alive. A probe that had been launched by a university that had later closed its doors when its moon had dried out and cracked. A probe that had drifted in a patient loop at the dark edge of the Orion Arm, waking every 10 days to take a small sip of starlight and to send a thin thread of data toward no one in particular, because sometimes machines keep promises when people forget them. The screen on the table showed static that looked like winter sand, and then a smear of light, and then a field of cold rocks, and then an edge, a black edge that did not belong to any rock. An edge that wasn't the kind dust makes, an edge made by plan and craft and will. And the chamber's silence grew heavier, and the old probe's camera tried to focus because even machines try to please, and lines sharpened and then blurred. Again, because the object was too big and too near and too black for a tired lens. Run it slower, the speaker said, and the archivist did, and the motion of stars turned surrepthic. And the object came on like night coming over a field, and no thrusters flared, and no heat bloomed, and no ID pinged. It drifted like a thought a god had lost and could not quite recall, and the whole showed very little, a long spine with ribs, like a dead whale, a prow that was not knife-sharp, but flat and blunt and patient, a hole that wore darkness like a cloak. General Vare's fingers flexed on the table edge as if he wanted to throw the table aside and fight the video. His jaw worked once, and he said it was a derelict or a false echo or a trick made by stitching rocks together and painting them black. And the archivist said to wait, to look there, at the line near the prow where the light bled over an angle in a way the old reference models had taught him to recognize. An angle unique to a design doctrine that had been called Terran. They leaned, and without feeling their bodies move, they stopped breathing without deciding to. And the object turned very slightly, and a plane of its side caught the star glow. And for 3 frames only, the lens loved them. 3 frames only it gave them. A gift. It gave them a line of white scratches on the dark, not clear and not proud, but true. Scratches that had once been letters. And if you were a child of any world that still looked up, you knew that shape, even if you had never been taught it. Because sometimes the universe writes a small alphabet in your bones, and those scratches were from that alphabet. The merchant marshal made a sound that was not a word. The speaker of Orizon closed his eyes as if the light hurt. The little water diplomat put both hands over his small heart, and the general, who had never learned how to kneel, did not. The probe's data continued, patient, unaware that it had changed a room and might change a galaxy, and the object passed like a continent that floats through a dream, and something else slid behind it in the dark, a shadow within a shadow, a submerged fleet the camera could not. Love enough to show, and then the probe's tiny power cell coughed. And the feed skipped, and when it returned the space was empty, the rocks were lonely, and the data thread faltered and went soft, and then the old machine fell silent, its job done in a way no one had ordered. The council did not speak yet, because sometimes the mind needs to sit with the shape and let the shape fit the old hole it was cut for. And the old hole here had a name they had refused to say for 2 hours. And they felt the name now like a hand on the shoulder in a dark hall. The speaker finally said, very carefully, that the chamber could not afford hysteria. There were explanations that did not require ghosts with guns. The general said he agreed, and that he would prepare an expeditionary force to seize the object and strip it, and show the galaxy that stories were for children. And the little water diplomat said that if you tell the sea, it is a story the sea laughs and drowns you. And the general did not answer, because he had never met a sea. The archivist asked permission to speak, not as a keeper of records, but as an old mind that had looked at old patterns for too long and learned which ones wake up. And the speaker granted it because something in his bones told him to be polite to old minds on nights like this. And the archivist said that a rumor does not erase fleets, and a raider does not turn off whole sectors without leaving a flag or a song. And a trick does not make a Heller veteran whisper a dead word, and if the universe is kind, then what they saw is a derelict. A monument drifting and hungry for heat, but the universe is rarely kind. And the shape they saw was not empty, it was listening. Silence again. And then the merchant marshal asked, what proof would make the Empire believe without first firing? What proof would make the guilds change routes before losing more blood and more credit? What proof would make small worlds sleep easier and not sell their children into service for protection money? The archivist said that proof had just brushed their faces like a cold hand. And the general said, a cold hand can be a friend or a thief, and he would rather break the wrist and ask later. They argued not like leaders, but like frightened animals. They circled and snapped and repeated themselves. They asked for numbers and were given guesses. They asked for dates and were given the kind of shrug that hurts the stomach. They asked for responsibility and saw it pass around the table like a dish no one wanted to taste. And then the speaker struck the stone with his claw again, and the sound was the only honest thing in the room, hard and flat and final. They voted to classify the recording, to seal the minutes, to say to their publics that a routine meeting had discussed tariffs and minor border questions, to schedule a larger hearing at a later date with more chairs and more lights and more lies, and to dispatch a small unmanned survey drone swarm to the coordinates where the old probe had died. A cheap gesture made to feel like courage because it was made in a room with locks. But the archivist did not stand. He touched the control once more and zoomed the 3 frames where the scratches showed. And he scrubbed the contrast, and he scrubbed the noise, and the image improved by less than a scholar's hope. And still the angle of the strokes and the spacing between them in the way. The last mark trailed as if the painter's hand had shaken on a rough morning. All of that spoke to him with a voice he had practiced not hearing, and he whispered a translation that the room was not ready to receive. He whispered it anyway, because some things speak you. And the speaker turned his head very slowly toward him as if turning too fast would call lightning. And the little water diplomat felt tears. And the general's eyes narrowed because he loved a target when it finally showed itself. And the merchant marshal closed her ledger, because ledgers are for worlds that still believe in tomorrow. The scratched letters, if you squinted, and if you had spent enough nights with dead alphabets, said something that did not admit debate. Something like a breath you can see in winter air, simple and absolute. And the archivist spoke it in the old tongue for which he had no music, and the chamber felt smaller when he did. So well, maybe it said something else in full. Maybe it was a registry that continued beyond the frame. Maybe it was a ship name that once made enemies feel a cold in their teeth. Maybe it was a home mark left on a hole by hands that loved Earth and the idea of it, but the piece they had said soul. And that was enough. The council leaders did not shout, they did not run, they did not summon guards. They did something worse. And more honest, they stared and they breathed like people who had been underwater too long and had finally reached the surface and realized the air itself was a storm. In the blurred image, with its black hole and its winter blue veins and its old scratches, sat in the middle of the table like a quiet weapon. No one wanted to touch it. Outside the secret chamber, the moon kept its cold. The trade lanes kept their gleam, the colonies kept their little lights. And the stars did what stars do. They burned without caring. But in the room under rock where the air tasted old, the story that had been a stain in the archives and a joke in the barracks and a warning in the mouths of grandmothers stood up. And it did not need to say its name to be known. The general finally broke the stillness. Because soldiers hate waiting more than they hate wounds. He said that the Empire would assemble a hunter group with reconnaissance escorts and attached to siege platforms and a courier to bring back salvage. He said they would leave at once for the Orion Edge. He said they would send the council proof. And his voice was iron again, because iron is sometimes just fear that learned how to wear boots. The speaker did not deny him. Because denial felt like a child's trick tonight, he said the motion would be recorded and approval sent. He said a formal statement would be written for no ears. He said they would all pretend to sleep and meet again when the drone swarm returned. And his hands trembled only when he looked away from them. The archivist folded his slates with careful hands that had learned reverence in rooms like this. He tied the old cloth and put it back in his satchel the way a priest puts a relic to. Bed he bowed to no one, because worship had no place in politics. And as he turned to leave, he let himself look once more at the 3 frames, at the scratches that were letters that were a door. And for a heartbeat he was young. He was in a reading room under warm lamps. He was laughing at a story about warrior ghosts. And then he was old again, and the lamps were gone, and the ghosts were not. When the doors finally opened, and the leaders went out single file into the cold tunnel, each of them carried a different lie they would tell themselves until the next meeting. The general carried the lie that victory loves the brave. The merchant marshal carried the lie that markets forgive. The speaker carried the lie that order can be negotiated with legend. And the little water diplomat carried no lie at all. Only a song his mother had taught him about deep seas and things that sleep there and wake when the world forgets they can. Behind them the table dimmed, the projection faded, the room remembered how to be stone. And far away on the dark edge of the Orion arm, the space where the probe had died filled with ordinary night. Which is to say, it filled with everything. And somewhere within that night, a shape moved without need of heat or herald or permission. A shape that had been called myth and would soon be called many other things, and its path curved like a finger. Tracing home, the council would tell no one, not yet, the edicts would hold. The locks would hold, the public face would hold, but the silence outside their doors had changed its taste. It had changed from a silence that makes you relax to a silence that makes you listen. And even those who denied knew that the next word would not be theirs. On a private channel, the general sent a coded order to a fleet that did not officially exist. He called it a training exercise, and he called the destination a navigational mistake, and he called the timetable acceptable, and the officers who received the order looked at each other and saw themselves as names carved on plaques. And they went anyway, because that is what officers do when stories get teeth. On a poorer world where docks creak and engines cough. A trader with one good eye painted over the name on his hull and chose a route that bent away from the Orion Edge. And he told his child that sometimes the faster road is the one that feels longer, and the child asked why. And he said, because you want to outpace something that does not run. And he did not explain further, because some lessons learn you. And in a room that smelled like dust and old ink, the archivist wrote the date at the top of a fresh page and then did not write anything else for a long time. He watched his hand in the light, and he watched the light on the skin that had grown thin. And he listened to the quiet of the building and to the quiet under the quiet. And then he wrote one sentence, simple and ugly and true. He wrote, "The legends are moving." When the next meeting was scheduled, and the drone swarm was already gone, and the hunter group was already gone, and the stars had already swallowed both, the council leaders came back to the stone room and sat as if nothing in the universe had weight, but that was later. And for now, the first night ended the way all important nights end, with men and women and others walking away to small beds and smaller comforts, while the thing they feared grew larger behind them, and the blurred image kept its secrets unless you looked hard. And if you looked hard, you could see that the scratches were not only letters, but also hands. Hands reaching. From an old place, and the hands looked very much like human hands. They had wanted to laugh at the story. They had wanted to file it and bury it and name a corridor after their courage. But the chamber filled with the thing that sits just before laughter and just before tears, the soft pressure of a world tipping. And the last thought in many minds as the doors sealed again was not grand. It was not a call to arms or a prayer. It was only a small, simple question without an answer. A question that made old bones feel young and young hearts feel old. A question that echoed in the stone and did not leave. What if the legends are real? Stars sang in silence, but not every ear was deaf. At the edge of known space, where navigation charts grew faint and dust clouds drifted like ghosts, there floated a listening post no one remembered building. It had no crew, only machines. Its job was old, its purpose older, to listen, to wait, and to catch whispers that should not exist. For thousands of years it had been silent. Ships forgot it. Empires redrew their maps. The council itself no longer paid for its upkeep, yet still it worked, pulling thin threads of static from the void. And then, one night measured only in machine heartbeats, the void spoke back. The first operator to see the anomaly was not even alive. He was long dead, but his protocols remained repeating in endless loops. A faint ping, weaker than a dying star, scratched across the receiver. The system almost ignored it, almost filed it as debris. But something in the signal did not fit. It was not noise. It was not random. It was a code. Buried inside the static, broken by time and distance, a pattern flickered like an old heartbeat. 3 long bursts, too short, a pause, then again. Listening posts compared it against every known language, every fleet code, every distress call. Nothing matched until the archives awoke. The code belonged to a library so old the post itself had forgotten it existed. A Terran signal protocol. The machine stuttered. Its processors struggled. Terran human, the ping came again? Steady, patient, as if whoever sent it knew someone, someday would hear. The station did what it was built to do. It recorded the signal. It amplified it. It sent it along relay chains that had not been used in generations. By the time it reached the council, the whisper had turned into thunder. In the council chamber the next day, the speaker of Orizon gripped the edge of the stone table until his claws hurt. Around him, the same leaders from the secret meeting sat frozen as the archivist replayed the signal. The sound filled the chamber, metallic, broken, but undeniably alive. 3 long bursts, too short, pause. Repeat on, patient, unyielding. It is not pirates, the archivist said. His voice was soft, but the silence made it heavy. It is not raiders. It is not noise. This is old. Very old. Terran in design. A beacon. A call. General Vare sneered. So, a derelict. A tomb shouting into nothing. We burn it, we silence. It, the end. But the little diplomat from the water world shook his head. His wide eyes reflected the pulsing signal as though it had taken root inside him. No tomb repeats for 40,000 years. Tombs fade. This is alive. This is waiting. The merchant marshal tapped her ledger nervously. If traders hear this rumor, panic will spread, convoys will scatter, markets will crash. The archivist ignored them. He leaned closer to the recording as though he could hear something they could not. The pattern carries more than sound. Look deeper. The hollow shifted. The bursts of sound became bursts of light, visualized as pulses of blue-white energy. They formed a phrase, looping endlessly. The archivist translated slowly, carefully, as though the words themselves carried weight. For Earth, for humanity. Chamber froze. Even General Vare stopped sneering. For Earth. Earth was not supposed to exist anymore. The homeworld was a ruin, abandoned. Its systems scoured by wars so ancient, the council no longer spoke of them. The beacon said otherwise. Council spies were dispatched in secret. 3 scout ships, fast and silent, slipped out toward the coordinates where the signal had been born. Weeks passed, then 2 returned. Or rather, pieces of them did. The first limped back without engines, its crew half dead, its black boxes full. Of static, the second arrived with no crew at all, drifting into dock like a ghost, its hull scarred by energy signatures no one recognized. The third never came back. From the survivors' lips came only fragments, broken by trauma and fear. They were there, one whispered, shaking, not dead, never dead. Watching us, they wore the old light, the Terran cross. I saw it. Then silence, the kind that breaks the mind. The chamber was louder than it had ever been. Shouts, denials, accusations. The speaker tried to calm them, but even his voice was drowned. The panic was spreading like fire in dry grass. Finally, the archivist raised his hand. His eyes were haunted but steady. We cannot call this myth anymore. The humans are real, and they want us to know it. The merchant marshal slammed her. Ledgers shut. If they are real, why hide? Why wait thousands of years before returning? The archivist's reply was colder than ice. Because they were never gone. They were only watching. He gestured to the projection again. Signal still pulsed, patient, endless. For Earth, for humanity. It is not a distress call, he said. It is a warning. And now we must ask ourselves, warning for us, or warning for them. Just as the council argued, a new report flashed across the chamber. Another probe, deep in the Orion arm, had captured a transmission piggybacking on the Terran signal. It was shorter, sharper. Translated, it said only, "You are not ready." The chamber fell into silence heavier than stone, and in the darkness beyond the Orion arm, unseen by their tired machines, a massive warship drifted closer. Its engines silent, its lights cold, its hull etched with scars older than empires, waiting. The galaxy lived on rumors now. Convoys whispered them at docking stations, soldiers repeated them in quiet barracks. And even the poorest miners in forgotten belts felt them when they looked into the dark. A story carried faster than light. The humans were not gone. They were out there, watching, waiting. But still the council told the public nothing. Still the leaders signed decrees that said everything was normal. And still the silence between stars grew heavier. Every cycle, until the vanishings became too many to ignore. It began on the trade routes, the veins of the galaxy. Merchant fleets moved through them like blood, carrying food or water, medicines. Even the luxuries empires could not live without. The routes were lifelines, guarded by escorts, patrolled by navies, yet one by one. Those veins were cut. A convoy of 6 ships leaving the Mirax sector simply never arrived. A medical carrier, bound for the core, was found adrift, hull intact, crew gone. A Heller patrol squadron sent to investigate vanished in turn, their distress beacon flickering for only 7 seconds before silence swallowed it, and then came survivors to few. 2 broken. One was dragged from a lifeboat by rescuers' skin. Burned lungs, filled with smoke. He tried to speak, coughed blood, and pressed his shaking hand against the medic's chest. His lips formed 3 words before he died. Dark, Terran, ships. Another was found clinging to the wreckage of a shuttle. His eyes stared wide, seeing things no one else could. He laughed when questioned. He laughed until his voice broke, and then whispered the same thing again and again. They came from the shadows. They did not miss. The council tried to bury the stories. They called them pirate lies, hysteria, tricks by smugglers. But merchants knew better. Soldiers knew better. The shadow fleet was real, and every cycle the shadow grew larger. The council met again in the stone chamber. The speaker of Origin had aged a decade in days. He slammed his claws against the table. This cannot go on. If trade collapses, empires will starve. The merchant marshal's voice cracked as she read the latest losses. 43 ships gone in 2 months. Insurance guilds collapsing. Whole colonies cut off. Markets are not collapsing, she said. They're already dead. General Vair's armor gleamed as always, but his face was drawn. He stood. Then we end this. I will take the Imperial fleet and scour the Orion arm clean. Whatever ghost hides there will burn. The archivist only shook his head. His voice was soft, but his words cut through the noise. You will not burn them. You will only find them. If you find them, General, they will erase you. The chamber fell still. The archivist activated the holoscreen. A blurry image appeared, grainy, but clear enough to silence every protest. Rose of shapes in the dark, dozens, maybe hundreds. They moved without light, without sound, like predators beneath black water. Their hulls were unlike any modern ship, angular, long, sharp. Blue lines pulsed faintly across them like veins under skin. The Shadow Fleet, the archivist said. Captured 2 days ago by a probe. Their size, their formation, their discipline. These are no raiders. These are warships. The designs are unmistakable. He paused, his eyes haunted. They are human. More reports arrived from across the stars. A convoy survivor described ships that seemed to appear out of nothing, sliding out of dark space without warning. They didn't broadcast. They didn't threaten. They didn't even hail. They just erased us like we were nothing. A soldier from a shattered patrol ship recalled how their weapons had no effect. We fired everything. Torpedoes, plasma, mines. It was like hitting stone with feathers. They cut through us in silence. No anger, no joy, just precision. And most chilling, a Heller admiral whispered before his death, "They let me live. They wanted me to tell you. They wanted you to know." The council could no longer deny. Its whispers were now facts. The humans were back. They had a fleet. The galaxy panicked. Minor worlds began closing their skies, refusing visitors. Merchants abandoned routes, leaving colonies to starve. Even empires that hated each other now looked at one another with the same fear. If the humans had returned, none of them were safe. The speaker demanded action. General Vare demanded war. The merchant marshal demanded silence to keep panic contained. And then, as they argued, the chamber lights flickered. The holoscreen shifted to a live feed from a scout patrol near the Orion arm. On screen, a Heller frigate approached a shadow. The shadow moved. And then the shadow unfolded into a ship, a massive warship, black hull glowing with faint blue veins. Its weapons charged in eerie silence. The patrol screamed, overcomes. The image went white, and the feed cut out. When the chamber light steadied, no one spoke. The general's fists clenched. So be it. If they want war, they will have it. The archivist only whispered, almost to himself, "They don't want war. They want us to." "Remember?" the speaker asked. "Remember what?" The archivist looked around the table, his voice trembling with a truth too heavy for any one person to bear. That humans were never myths. They were always here. And now, their shadow fleet has stepped into the light, and far away, on the edge of the Orion arm, the shadow fleet gathered. Dozens of warships drifting in silence, like wolves circling unseen. Their weapons hummed softly. Their hulls carried scars of ancient wars, and etched across one great ship's side was a word that no alien dared speak aloud. Humanity. The fleet turned slowly, patiently toward the heart of the galaxy. The galaxy had lived too long on shadows and whispers. Now it demanded answers. General Vare of the Heller Empire gave them. He stood before the council chamber in full armor, voice sharp as steel. "No. More fear? No more waiting. My fleet will hunt these shadows. We will drag them into the light." The speaker of Orizon tried to protest. "General, you do not know what they are." But Vare slammed his fist on the table. "I know enough. They bleed. And if they do not bleed, we will burn them until they do." The council voted in secret. Fear drove their hands. Pride drove their silence. Within 2 days, the Heller fleet of 20 warships, 6 cruisers, and 1 siege dreadnought surged toward the Orion arm. The first sighting came from the fleet's scouts. Unidentified contacts at 2 million kilometers. No signals. No IFF. The shapes appeared on sensors, first shadows against shadows. At first, the Heller commanders laughed. Ghosts again. Tricks of the void. But then the shadows moved. Slowly, with purpose, one ship emerged from the dark. Long and angular, its hull black as night, glowing faint blue lines across its spine. Its prow bore marks scratched, ancient but still proud. The Heller admiral smirked. "Transmit demand. Order their surrender." "Come, officer, open channels, voice firm. Unidentified vessels, this is the Heller Empire. Power down and identify. You are in restricted space. Static. Silence." "Repeat the order," the admiral growled again. Silence. Then after long moments, the channel crackled. A single voice replied, cold, calm, human. "This space is human." The words froze the bridge. Some officers did not even understand them, but translators carried the weight. A claim, a warning. The admiral's smirk widened into a grin. Fire. The Heller fleet opened up with a storm of weapons. Plasma lances lit the void. Missiles screamed forward. Railguns tore space itself. Explosions flared against the shadow ship. For a heartbeat, the admiral thought it was over. Then the fire faded. The ship still floated, untouched. Its blue lines glowed brighter, and then it struck. One shot, a beam of white fire lanced across the void. A Heller cruiser split in two, its shields shredded like paper, its engines exploding into silence. The Heller bridge erupted in shouts. "Shields up! Return fire! Surround it!" But the human ship moved with terrifying precision. It slid through the fleet like a predator among prey. Each weapon strike surgical, erasing ships one by one. No noise, no hesitation. 12 Heller. Warships died in under 3 minutes. Their wrecks burned, their crews silenced. The survivors fired wildly, desperate, but nothing pierced the human armor. Admiral Vere stood frozen. His armor gleamed, but his eyes betrayed fear. What are they? The cum officer turned pale. "Sir, they are not trying to destroy us all. They are leaving gaps. They are letting some escape." And indeed the human ship ignored. Certain frigates, striking only enough to cripple the fleet, but leaving survivors. The pattern was clear. This was not war. It was a message. Why would they spare us? The admiral whispered. A new transmission came through. Not long, not loud, just 3 words. "Remember this day." Then the shadow ship vanished into the void, faster than sensors could follow. Only a handful of Heller ships limped back to safe space. Their crews were broken, their stories the same. Humans had returned, and they had chosen to reveal their strength. When the survivors reached the council, panic erupted. The merchant marshal demanded truth. The speaker called for secrecy, but the survivors' Holly footage spoke louder than politics. A single human warship, an entire fleet erased. In the chilling voice across the stars, "This space is human," the archivist whispered to himself as the chamber trembled with fear. Legends? No, they never left. They only waited. Across the Orion arm, deep in the silence, the human fleet gathered once more. Dozens of warships now visible, aligned. In perfect formation, their blue veins glowing brighter. They had made their first move. And the galaxy had seen only a fraction of their power. The survivors came back broken. Ships limped into safe harbors with hulls torn like paper, engines coughing fire, and crews whispering words that should not have existed. On one ship, a Heller captain was carried out on a stretcher. His voice was raw, his eyes wide, repeated the same words until medics sedated him. One ship erased us." The council had tried to silence the rumors. Now they had Holly footage. And the galaxy could no longer deny what it had seen. The council chamber was packed. Leaders, merchants, spies, generals, everyone wanted answers. The holoscreen flickered to life. The first image, a Heller fleet in formation. The second, a shadow moving in the void. The third, a ship long, angular, glowing blue veins. Gasps filled the chamber. The alien leaders leaned forward as the recording continued. Weapons fire erupted. Plasma lances, missiles, cannons, the void lit up like a star being born. Then, silence. The shadow ship remained untouched. Moments later, a white beam tore through the Heller fleet. One cruiser split in half, then another, then another. The holo showed ships burning, men and women screaming. Everything erased with frightening precision. Then the voice. Cold, calm, human. This space is human. The chamber fell silent. For a long moment no one spoke. The merchant marshal slammed. Her ledger shut. You see, it is no myth. They are real. And they are stronger than anything we can imagine. If traders hear this, markets will collapse overnight. General Voss stood, his pride wounded but unbroken. His fleet had been humiliated, but his arrogance burned hotter. They're only ghosts with weapons. I will rebuild the fleet. Next time, we strike with greater force. The Speaker of Orison shook his head. No, this was not a battle. It was a demonstration. They wanted us to see, to fear. The archivist leaned forward, his voice trembling. And we do fear. Do you not feel it? They are not myths. They are not whispers. They are flesh and steel and fire. Humanity has returned. More survivor testimonies followed. A young Heller lieutenant stood before the council, his body trembling. They could have killed us all. They didn't. They left us alive. On purpose. They wanted us to spread the story. Another survivor, pale and shaking, whispered of symbols on the hull. I saw markings, not alien, not random. Human. Letters carved in steel. I don't know what they meant, but they were old. So old, the council chamber erupted. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for unity against the human threat. The merchant marshal begged for silence to prevent panic. But the truth was unstoppable now. Across the galaxy, whispers turned into belief. The humans were back. Colonies that once mocked the legend now trembled. Fleets gathered at borders. Merchants abandoned profitable routes. And ordinary citizens began telling stories in the dark. Stories of warrior ghosts returning from the void to judge the galaxy. The council tried to control the narrative, but hollow footage spread faster than censorship. Every child who saw the recording of the shadow ship knew one thing: the legends were true. Then, as if to end the debate, a new transmission appeared. No one knew how it reached the council chamber. No source could be traced. It simply played, uninvited, across every screen. A shadowed figure stood against the backdrop of stars. Its features were blurred, but its voice was clear. Human. Legends. We are memory. We are flesh. We are judgment. This space is human. The figure vanished. The screen went black. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Some screamed for war. Others for surrender. But the truth was undeniable. The legends were real, far beyond the council's reach. In the dark silence of the Orion Arm, hundreds of human warships gathered in perfect formation. Their blue veins pulsed brighter now, like a heartbeat echoing. Across the void, the galaxy had doubted, the galaxy had mocked. But now the galaxy would remember. The humans were no longer whispers. The humans were back. The galaxy was used to war. It was used to raiders, rebellions, pirates, and invasions. But nothing it had ever known prepared it for what followed, because this was not war. This was silence. It began with the supply chains. Merchant convoys vanished one after another. No wrecks. No survivors. Just silence. Then came the colonies. Entire star systems stopped sending reports. Their com stations went dark, their beacons offline. At first, neighbors thought it was storms or sabotage. But then dozens of systems fell quiet. The silence spread like a plague. Maps of the Orion Arm grew holes. Entire sectors disappeared from the network. The council tried to investigate. Fleets were dispatched, probes launched, scouts sent out. None returned. The galaxy was being cut apart piece by piece, and through it all, faint reports filtered in, shadows moving against stars. Glowing blue. Weapons that erased fleets in seconds. Always the same whisper. The humans are back in the council. Chamber leaders argued louder than ever. The merchant marshal's voice broke as she listed the losses. Trade has collapsed. Insurance guilds bankrupt. Colonies starving. This is no longer rumor, it is ruin. General Vare pounded the table. Then we fight harder. We gather every fleet, every army. We burned the Orion arm clean. The archivist shook his head slowly. You do not understand. They are not meeting us in battle. They are not conquering. They are dismantling us. The speaker leaned forward. Dismantling? Yes, the archivist whispered. Piece by piece. They cut the veins. They break the voice. They erase the maps. And when they are done, we will not have a galaxy. We will have silence. Reports painted the same terrifying picture everywhere. Convoy ambushes. Entire fleets gone within minutes. Only debris left behind. Colony strikes. Power grids offline. Relays shattered. Leadership vanished. Yet civilians often untouched. Left alive but isolated. Forced to whisper of Terran ships that vanished into the dark. Fleet battles. When alien armadas tried to fight, the humans appeared, destroyed command ships in seconds, and disappeared before reinforcements arrived. It was not conquest. It was control. The galaxy began to realize humanity was not trying to win battles. Humanity was making sure the galaxy could not fight back at all. On a mining colony near the rim, lone worker sent a last broadcast before silence claimed his world. His face was pale, his voice shaking. They don't speak, they don't negotiate, they cut us off. The stars are dying around us. Tell the council. Tell them we are already lost. In the council, leaders argued about surrender, about alliances, about desperate last weapons. But fear had already spread beyond politics. Ordinary people knew the truth. The galaxy was helpless. Then came the second broadcast. It reached every comm station, every ship, every colony. No source could be found. The message was simple. The screen filled with a single warship, black hole, blue veins glowing like fire. A human voice spoke. No more slavery. No more chains. No more empires. The stars will be free or burn. Transmission ended. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Some demanded surrender. Others demanded war. But none could deny what. The galaxy had just heard, far away, deep within the Orion arm. The human fleet moved, silent, endless. Whole sectors already erased from maps. Whole empires crippled without a single declaration of war. This was no legend. This was no rumor. This was humanity returning not as conquerors, but as judges. And the galaxy was already kneeling, whether it admitted it or not. The galaxy had lost its voice. Trade routes were cut. Colonies were silent. Fleets were broken. And still, the humans did not reveal themselves fully. They struck, they vanished, they whispered through wreckage and fear. Until one day, scouts found something they were never meant to see. It was a small fleet of scouts. Desperate and tired, their ships running. On fumes. They had been searching for the source of the Terran signals. Following faint trails across dark systems, and then they found it. At first, they thought it was a dead system. Cold sun, old planets, dust swirling in silence. But as they approached, their sensors screamed. Massive energy signatures. Thousands of them. The void shimmered. Ships appeared. It's not just one, not a dozen, but hundreds. Black and gold warships in perfect formation, their hulls glowing with blue veins of light. They stretched across the void like a wall, blotting out the stars. The scouts froze. They tried to transmit, but the fleet surrounded them instantly. Weapons locked but did not fire. And then, through the silence, a message came. You have reached Sol. The scouts sent back what little data they could before their ships were disabled. The images reached the council and spread like wildfire. Earth was alive, the Sol system. Once thought abandoned and ruined, now burned with life. Orbital platforms larger than moons circled the planet. Shipyards stretched across Mars, glowing with construction. Jupiter's moons bristled with weapons. Saturn's rings glimmered with hidden stations, and around Earth itself hung a fortress fleet, thousands of warships. Carriers dreadnoughts, their hulls marked with the old Terran cross. The galaxy watched in silence as the images spread. Homeworld was not dead. It had never been dead. Humanity had not vanished, they had hidden, building in the dark. Preparing in silence, the council chamber shook with arguments. This is impossible, shouted one leader. Earth was destroyed. No, whispered the archivist. Earth went silent, and now it has spoken again. The merchant marshal trembled. If this spreads, every market collapses. No one will trade when Earth controls the skies. General Vere's voice cracked with anger. Then we destroy them before they destroy us. The speaker of Orison shook his head slowly. Look at the images. Okay. Can you not see? We cannot destroy them. We cannot even reach them. Then came another broadcast. It filled every channel, every hala, every screen. A human figure stood in full light this time, armored, eyes cold. Behind him stretched the Soul Fleet, endless and unstoppable. His voice was steady, calm, unyielding. We did not return to conquer. We returned to end your wars. No more slaves, no more empires. The stars will be free or burn. The broadcast ended as the chamber erupted into chaos. The galaxy panicked. Empires that had once laughed at human myths now whispered of surrender. Minor worlds declared neutrality, hoping to avoid notice. Even the mighty Heller Empire, still seething from its defeat, hesitated to send ships into the dark again, and through it all, the image of Earth burned in every mind. Strong, alive, untouchable, far across the void. The Soul Fleet moved for the first time. Thousands of warships aligned, engines glowing, turning. Not outward, but inward toward the heart of the galaxy. Humanity had returned, not as survivors, not as whispers, but as judgment. And the galaxy braced for the storm. The galaxy trembled. Empires gathered fleets, colonies locked their skies, and merchants abandoned the stars. Yet none of it mattered. Because humanity had moved, the Soul Fleet, thousands strong, was no longer content to wait. It began as a whisper, then a scream. Scouts at the edge of council space detected massive FTL ruptures, not dozens, dozens. The stars themselves seemed to flicker. As the void split open, and then they came, human warships, black holes glowing with veins of blue fire, carriers the size of cities, dreadnoughts blotting out the light of suns, destroyers in perfect formation. A fleet spread across the sky like a wall of judgment. Entire alien fleets rushed to meet them, desperate and terrified. The Heller Empire sent its largest armada in history. Dozens of empires joined them. It was the greatest alliance ever formed. The void burned with weapons fire. Plasma, torpedoes, cannons, everything the galaxy had. But the humans did not falter. Their shields burned white. Their weapons cut through armadas like knives through smoke. But entire fleets vanished in minutes. And through it all, the humans advanced. Silent, relentless. Unstoppable, the Galactic Council chamber shook as reports flooded in. The Heller Armada is breaking. The core fleets are retreating. The colonies are surrendering without. A fight. The speaker of Orison buried his face in his hands. The merchant marshal wept. General Vere shouted for reinforcements, but even he could see the truth. No fleet could stop them. No empire could match them. Humanity had returned not as warriors, but as gods of war. And then came the broadcast. Every channel went dark. Every screen turned to static. Then slowly an image appeared. A human commander. Standing tall in black and gold armor, the Soul Fleet burning behind him. His voice was calm, steady, and merciless. No more slavery. No more chains. No more empires. The stars will be free or burn. The galaxy listened in silence. The commander raised his hand, and behind him the warships moved in perfect unison. They fired not at civilians, not at colonies, but at the fleets of the old empires. Battleships shattered, carriers split apart, armadas burned, and then the humans stopped. They could have erased everything. They could have burned the galaxy clean, but they didn't. Instead, they left the fleets broken, the empires kneeling, the council silent, and the message echoed again, across every world, every station, every mind. The age of empires is over. The age of humanity has begun. Worlds that once mocked Earth now bent the knee. Empires surrendered. The Heller, proud and unyielding, finally bowed in silence. The archivist whispered in awe. They were never legends. They were memory. They were patience. And now they are judgment. Galaxy understood at last. Humanity had not come to conquer it, had come to decide who would be allowed to remain in the skies above the council world. The human fleet hung like a shadow, blotting out the sun. Silence reigned. Then the commander gave the final words. Remember, this, we are not myths. We are not whispers. We are humanity. And we have returned. Transmission ended. The fleet drifted back into the void, leaving burning wrecks and terrified empires in its wake. The galaxy was silent once more, but this silence was different. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of judgment. Humanity had spoken, and the stars would never forget.